with secular Jewish heroes, I think you would say, and martyrs, Shorter Cheney Goodman, of course, and King and Barry Rustin, and the whole gamut. And I was raised with very specific ideas about the universalism of justice and the need for universal justice. We were taught that everyone is the same, and that everyone deserves the same things. And what I think of as very, very Jewish values, but outwardly directed. There was obviously some contradictions to me in these two sets of beliefs that I grew up with, this very particular Jewish direction that I was moving in, and this demand for universal justice. I found a way for a time to marry these two. I joined at the age of 14 or so what sounds very archaic now, but a socialist Zionist youth movement called Hashomer Tzair. I know there's at least one person here who's and we had a camp in the Catskills by Liberty, New York, and for 2 months every summer we went up there and we played kibbutz. And it was just a bizarre sort of place in retrospect. We had very tough Israeli counselors, people who came from the kibbutzim in Israel, invariably were just out of the paratroopers, and they saw it as their job to sort of beat the diaspora softness out of us. So it was a normal camp in the sense that there was canoes, and there was a whiff of hormonal urgency in the air at all times. But we also did sort of things that the other camps didn't do. They would wake us up in the middle of the night sometimes, and we would play a game called Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, where we would have to go into the woods and whittle sticks and battle imaginary Nazis. Seward Groves won, by the way, by about 4 or 5 in the morning. We would play, actually, because this was, generationally, this was the event. We would play Radar and Heavy. We actually built one night just outside Grossinger's, an airstrip that was ready for the C-130s that would come to rescue the Jews who were obviously being held captive in Grossinger. So we had this, and there was also this kind of Bolshevik inevitability to the idea that we would make Aliyah and we would become soldiers and farmers just like these guys. But because we were socialists, we also were by far and away the most pro-Sandinista summer camp in all of the Catskills. And we would march in almost any demonstration, south of 14th Street especially, that you could imagine. I think that the sort of height of the absurdity of this movement was when a couple of my friends marched in a demonstration under the banner, Socialist Zionists for Animal Rights. Which to me is, and I used to be the Washington reporter for the New Yorker, so I know a little bit about politics. That's actually the smallest special interest group in American history. But there you have it, and it worked out very well. We were building this kibbutz and this commune and this socialist existence up there in the Catskills, and we were committed to a progressive Israel, and we were committed to a progressive world, and it worked out very fine in the Catskills. But Israel is not, as I found out, in the Catskills. It's in the Middle East, and that's sort of the basic problem. If we were in the Catskills, we'd have maybe a different set of problems, but not quite the problems we have. So I found myself in a place where I wasn't prepared to be, didn't want to be, in this prison camp. Just to give you a flavor of this, and much of the book is about this place. Just to give you a flavor, I said there's 6,200 prisoners. It was an open-air prison, open-air tent city, essentially. So if you stood in the guard tower in the center of the camp, and if you looked for about a kilometer in any direction, you would see rows and rows of huge tents separated by barbed wire and sand berms in which APCs would ride. You would have guard towers everywhere. You would have the first day there was always sort of a sensory overload. Not only fear, but just try to imagine that. The smells are intense because one of the mistakes the Israeli army made in the first Palestinian uprising, one of the many mistakes, was that it assumed early success. And so the latrines were only dug about 4 feet into the dirt. So you had that problem. The prisoners, to heat water, we would give them this basically black tar to burn. And so you had these clouds of black smoke over the camp. And it was in the desert, so it was enormously hot. So you have the smell of sweat and urine, and just 6,000 males in close quarters. The Palestinians would eat, this is a smell that I actually never eradicate from my nostrils. They would eat a bean stew every day called fool, which was, at least in the way they made it, kind of noxious. And so you would have this brown cloud of fool sort of sitting over the camp. The noise was unbelievable. We were next to, actually we were right in the middle. There was an air base to the left of us and a tank base to the right of us. So the F-16s would fly about 100, 200 feet over the camp and boom us all the time. You had a situation where, as many of you know, the sound of 2 Israelis having a quiet conversation equivalent to the sound of 8 Americans yelling at each other. So you had, and add to that incredible tension of this violent, overcrowded prison, and add to that 6,000 very tense Semites/Palestinian branch, and you can imagine what the feeling was like in this place. It was not like the Catskills by a long shot. And those weren't the things that actually bothered me when I first arrived there. What bothered me was the uselessness of it. Unlike the Second Intifada, we can talk about this in a minute. The First Intifada, the way I divide these two in my mind, the First Intifada was about 1967 borders. And as a good social Zionist, post the settlement movement, I looked at the Palestinian prisoners and thought to myself, well, I'd probably be one of them if I had born Palestinian. And so I had that as a problem. I had a bigger problem, which was, and this isn't fair, and I think a lot of you will understand what I mean when I say that sometimes we Jews hold Israel to expectation we hold no one else to. Certainly the rest of the world does do this, but there was behavior that I simply did not acknowledge or did not understand as Jewish. That I had at the moment, and I write about this in the book, there was a moment of extreme cognitive dissonance for me soon after I got there, when I saw an Orthodox Jewish soldier wearing a kippah beating a Palestinian. And I thought to myself, well, all the historical models are upside down here. And it was a gratuitous beating. It wasn't a beating in self-defense. It was just, and it struck me that we've entered a dangerous new territory when a guy with a kippah is beating on the head of a Palestinian who hasn't done anything to deserve that beating. In short, I found it somewhat nightmarish. I decided for a couple of reasons that I would try to make the best of it, and you alluded to this before. I decided instead of just sort of keeping my head down, which was the average and appropriate response of most of the Israeli society in this place, the average goal of a soldier in Ketziot was to avoid getting stabbed and then go home. And it's a worthy goal. But I decided that I would try to get to know some of the Palestinians. I decided that for 2 reasons. One is very basic. I had never met a Palestinian because in the utopia of Catskill summer camp, they didn't have any Palestinians. We had a YMCA camp down the road. That doesn't